Let's talk about tenant screening. I know you guys are experts in that. Let's talk about why that's so important and some tips that you might be able to give my listeners.
Well, first thing, I mean, as your tenants come in, you really want to finding the right tenant is the key. You get the wrong tenant in, 60, 90 to 100 days down the road, you're evicting them. Now you got to turn that unit again. You've got a vacant unit. Mm-hmm. So finding the right tenant screening company that gets you the reports that you want. You don't necessarily don't just go to companies that offer tenant screening. Know the reports that you want, and then because a lot of them
give some examples of the types of reports that a person should look for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we learned is that a credit report doesn't really tell you that if a tenant's going to be a good tenant or not. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All it does is tell you if they have the financial wherewithal and if they've paid their credit card bills. The dirty secret, I think, the dirty little secret, I think, overall within the landlord-tenant eviction policy, I mean, the average eviction across the United States is a little bit over $7,000 cost to a landlord. That includes attorney's fees, lost income,
turnover,
and turnover costs, and then finding a new tenant. Mm-hmm. So it can be very expensive having to evict a tenant. So the problem is many of the municipalities, especially the larger ones, actually seal eviction records. So without having access to those, or if they may go to a eviction court as part of the negotiation to get them out, the attorney may agree to seal the record. And in which case, sealed record, there's no judgment, there's nothing of record. So
no way to know they were a flake in the past, right?
Absolutely. So you want to look at, and there's a couple systems out there that actually track eviction records as far or rental payment history. But what we run, in addition to tenants, to our typical credit report, because the credit report does tell you some of the stuff.
Sure.
But we also run, and this was a hard lesson learned investing in C neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. We started running criminal background checks, but also Social Security number ID verification checks to make sure that the Social Security number
is real,
issued and
right.
Actually issued, because you can create a fake one and then create a history behind it.
Wow.
And then from there, we also run a eviction liens and judgments search, because a lot of times it doesn't pull up on a credit report, but you have a separate search through the counties and states. And then there's also a myriad of others as far as national criminal. You can do a sex offender database search, depending on what you as a landlord set as your guidelines that are HUD compliant.
Right.
And so, there's all types of different reports, but what you want to do is make sure that what you are looking for your tenant, for who your tenant you want your tenant to be, complies with that. And the best way to do that is actually doing the screening reports, but also not just the reports. Don't rely on paper. One of the biggest things that we learned early on was verify everything as well.
Pick up the phone.
Because and 99% of the people are going to tell the truth on the application, but it's that 1% that may not or does not do that. And we've actually been guest speakers at many police organizations about how to identify potential problem tenants.
Really,
in neighboring areas.
Well, I'd love to hear some tips there. And so just to recap: credit report, criminal check, maybe a national criminal check, FED eviction judgment check, sex offender check. I mean, that's a lot, and that's a lot of things that you really should be looking at. So that's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, you really want to, on these reports, I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that'll just, they're selling you. If you're going to go for the cheap report, you're going to get a public records report is what you're going to get. You want to find a good, reputable company that is nationwide that you can really work with.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what you alluded to some tips that the police department mentioned. Can you share any of those?
Absolutely. Some of the stuff that we've you always look for the person. The number one red flag. I need to move tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
That's usually somebody that's either being evicted or that has some sort of issue going on that they have to kind of escape and run out.
Yep.
Number two is we look at someone who's more interested in ease of access for the unit versus the actual unit. Meaning, I alluded or mentioned before that the property that we, one of the first properties that we did for Learning Link centers was actually in a pretty rough neighborhood. And frankly, it was actually gang infested in one of the worst drug neighborhoods in the LA County area.
You were being nice when you said it was a C area.
Yeah, absolutely. When we actually drove up to our third building that we bought there were a whole bunch of gang members hanging out front, and they started flashing us gang signs.
Yeah. It might be a little further on in the alphabet, that area.
Yeah.
They usually run off, but we worked with the police department to actually create methodologies. As someone who's looking, that's more interested about, is the window facing the alley or street so that I might be able to do something and
do some business,
sell something, do some business versus is this apartment really work for me?
Right.
And if they want to pay cash,
That's interesting.
if cash is always a problem.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I had a property where they cut a hole in the front door so they could pass the stuff.
Pass it through. Yeah.
I by the way, I heard a great story. My friend Maureen Maz, I love this. I just got to share it since we're on the topic. She had a drug problem in one of her apartment complexes in Atlanta, and she connected with the police department, and she couldn't get these guys out. She knew she could get them out in about a month, but she wanted them out sooner. So she passed a flyer out that they were going to they were going to train their drug sniffing dogs, and she was volunteering her property for doing that. It's just freaking awesome.
Okay, that's brilliant.
That's brilliant.
Is that awesome? I love that.
Yeah,
all right. Anything else that you guys got from the cops, or is that pretty much wrap that?
The Crime Watch meetings, it's good to attend those. You really should be attending those.
Right.
Don't, a lot of times people go to these Crime Watch meetings and they tell about people that have skipped or done damage and people write it down. You got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
That you're creating a blacklist and you don't want to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And a lot of times, actually, the last thing also is what we call a proxy renter, where, believe it or not, a lot of the gang members or criminals would actually
have their girlfriend or somebody else.
Yeah.
Rent for them.
A college student.
So that's where you actually verify and you start contacting the employers, employment. It was so bad, and we didn't realize how bad it was. This was probably about a year or so after we really started investing in the neighborhoods. One of our managers was going through, and they had verified employment, everything. And she decided, the person works right around the street. They had actually verified the employment, calling the employer.
Wow.
And they said, the person works just around the corner. I'll let them know that they were
approved.
Right. He went to the place of work, and lo and behold, it's a vacant space. There's not even a business there. Wow. And she called them on it and was like, I just wanted to verify your, address. And they're like, oh, yes, it's this address. They said, oh, I was just there. And I went to actually tell you that we're going to approve you. Click.
Yeah,
hung up. Never heard from them ever again.
Wow.
Another thing is make sure when you run a report that you actually get the report. Don't trust a tenant to bring you a report.
Oh yeah.
Because you can go online, you can take your average 11-year-old and say, hey, this is what a report looks like. Can you create one for me?
Sure.
And they'll be able to do it, and they'll bring that in. They'll have.
Oh yeah, they'll say, hey, by the way, I just got this from another property, so you save you some money. Here you go. Yeah, that's very good advice.
Yeah, we've seen that, and it can create a headache.
Yeah, there's some sophisticated professional tenants out there, and guys, don't underestimate how important knowing what you can and can't do discrimination wise as well, because there are a lot more protected classes now than there ever were, especially in places like California. You just really need to be up to speed on that.